Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and I hope you're having a great day. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your thumbs up. Thank you for all you do to support the channel. And yes, we are commanded to love one another, whether we want to or not, or whether we agree with each other or not. Well, the billion-dollar question is, has Trump gone too far with Minnesota? Is Minnesota out of hand? And who's going to win this standoff between the protesters in Minnesota that they can't seem to get out of the streets, Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security, and the President of the United States, Donald Trump? There's a triangular skirmish going on between those three, and it remains to be seen who's going to prevail. I think if somebody wants to know just how strong the long arm of the law in the United States of America can be, keep messing with Donald Trump. Now he is threatening to send the military into Minnesota. And I think that's a bit extreme because nobody seems to be trying to de-escalate the situation and talk to the people and remind them that we are a country of laws and everybody has to follow the law. If somebody is here illegally, the president has the right to have them deported. And if they are here under a temporary protective order, then he can still revoke that temporary protective status for them. So he's not acting outside of his authority as the president of the United States. And the irony in all of this is that so many of these people that are being run up out of here voted for Donald Trump. Minnesota is typically a Democratic state, and they vote Democratic most of the time. But those Somalis up there have been voting Republican. Not all of them, but enough of them have been voting Republican that Minnesota in some of these election cycles come up in the toss-up column. They're too close to call when Minnesota used to be solidly Democratic. But the Somalis up there are doing that. According to multiple news reports, President Trump publicly stated that he is prepared to invoke the Insurrection Act in Minnesota if state officials don't obey the law and fail to control what he described as violent unrest. These tensions follow two recent incidents involving ICE agents in Minneapolis, one fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good and another shooting during an attempted arrest of a Venezuelan immigrant. Protesters have grown in response, and federal officers have already deployed tear gas in some areas. Wow. So Donald Trump is going to invoke the Insurrection Act if the governor and the state officials don't get those protesters out of the streets. That's what I hear him saying. The Insurrection Act is a federal law from 1807 that allows the president to deploy the U.S. military inside the country under certain circumstances. Normally, the military can't act as law enforcement because of the Posse Comitatus Act, but the Insurrection Act is one of the few exceptions. It's been used only about 30 times in American history. The last major use was in 1992 during the Los Angeles unrest. So when a president even threatens to invoke it, that's a serious moment. It's getting rough up there, and I'm not sure why the people are so against agents coming into that state and doing what the law says they're supposed to do if people are up there illegally. But anyway, there needs to be a better discourse. There needs to be some communication between the federal government and the state government up there because somebody has already been killed. And we don't want to keep having that happening in Minnesota because we don't know why the people are doing what they're doing. We don't know what's going on up there. I find it hard to believe that all of that ruckus going on up there is over Somalis. Well, I think it's more than the Somalis up there illegally. I think some other folks are up there illegally that we don't think are up there illegally. Because otherwise, why all of these white folks out there in the streets fighting for some Somalis? I find that very hard to believe. And as far as these people talking about the Civil War, well, it may not be the one they want, but apparently this is one they're going to get. Trump clashed with city and state leaders over his efforts to deploy National Guard troops last year and recently rescinded deployment in Chicago, Portland, and Los Angeles after legal defeats. And what that tells us is that when the state takes a stand, when the states take him to court, they win because they haven't requested the National Guard or the military to come into their state. So, in a sense, the president is overstepping state powers. But it seems like the state is not taking a firm enough stand. They've got to get those people out of the streets. Why won't the people get out of the streets? Well, based on reporting from Newsclip and NBC, the protesters are demanding accountability for the shootings, transparency about what happened. They want a reevaluation of ICE's role in Minnesota communities. Some groups are calling for the abolition of ICE. Well, that's not going to happen. I don't see that happening. Then others want federal agents removed from local neighborhoods. They're not going to leave those neighborhoods as long as they think that there are illegals living in those neighborhoods. And it must be a lot of them up there because they're staying up there in Minnesota instead of moving on. So the protests are a mix of immigration rights, local residents being concerned about having all of those agents in their communities. And there are probably some of those anarchists or what they call Antifa, these anti police violence organizers, these people who just don't want the police in the country at all. So some of them I think are probably just agitators, as will always show up when it's something like that. So they've got to remove the agitators to find out what the people are really concerned about. The governor of Minnesota needs to act. He needs to have a stronger voice and he needs to work closer with the administration. The president is the president. A lot of us didn't vote for him, but he still has the power, the full authority of that office. And so he has to cooperate with him in order to get those people out of the streets before somebody else gets hurt. And that's just being responsible. Now, that's just how I see it. But y'all let me know what you think about this. Thank you for listening and have a good evening.